Hey everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. By now, everyone recognizes just how special last summer's Mondegreen Festival was, inclusive of the music and the overall experience. Today's guest, Seamus Gallivan, had a premonition of how special the festival would be to him, and he emailed me several weeks ahead of time. He asked if he could kind of reserve the festival to come on the podcast and talk about it after it was played. No one had ever asked to kind of reserve a show before, so I wasn't sure how to respond. I told Seamus to hold off for now. Let's see how the festival goes, what his experience is like, and what there would be to talk about after it was over. But in the end, Seamus was right. There was plenty to discuss. While I did release a full festival recap soon after it was over, Seamus got back in touch and asked if he could tell his story about Night 3 of Mondegreen, August 17th, 2024. Certainly, to both of us, it was the musical highlight of the weekend. And you can hear it in our voices during today's conversation. Seamus came prepared with tons of notes and observations, many of which mirrored mine, and it demonstrated that we were on the same page. You can even hear our voices rise, and we start to speak faster and faster as we approach some of the night's musical highlights. And believe me, there's no shortage of highlights for today's show. Let's join Seamus to talk about Trey's kooky guitar tones, the San Francisco Bay Area, and much more as we discuss Night 3 of the Mondegreen Festival from August 17th, 2024 at the Woodlands in Dover, Delaware. Seamus, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you for having me, Brian.
Very excited to have you here because you picked a show that, at least at the time of this recording, we are not that far away from having occurred. You know, I've had people ask me to review shows that were played while the same tour is still going on. We're not quite there, but almost. So we've had just enough time for this show, which is August 16th, 2024 at the Woodlands, better known as Night 3 of Mondegreen. And there is something about it that you said you just needed to talk about. In fact, you even emailed me before the Mondegreen Festival and asked if you didn't use this word, but if you could claim the festival or that show. And we tried to narrow it down. So let me ask before we get going and we hear about you in the lightning round. What was it about Mondegreen in the time leading up to it that you knew you had to talk about it before it even occurred?
As everybody knows, Mondegreen was the first festival back since Magnaball. I'm a relatively young Fish fan, you could say. And so the idea of going to a festival has always been the dream magnum opus for me. I had tickets and flights to Curveball in 2018. The day before my flight, I heard about the cancellation and it was heartbreaking, but I still made a trip out east. So, which is to say, Mondegreen was a long time coming for me. And I just knew it was going to be the banger that it ended up being.
So I assume it met your expectations. Did you feel like your dream has been fulfilled?
My dream has been fulfilled, Brian.
And I'm glad to hear you say that because I got into Fish assuming, we'll get into this about your backstory, but I got into Fish, I'm assuming, well before you, and that has not changed. This idea of a Fish festival being sort of the culmination of a dream or this very romantic aspect of being a fan. It was true when I first heard about the Clifford Ball and the Great Wentz, etc. I mean, my first Fish festival was it. So I had to wait a little while since when I got into Fish before I could make it up to the middle of nowhere. I'm glad that while I found it very romantic, that all these years later, it's still a very romantic sense to go to the festival.
Absolutely. And it's been that case for me for my whole existence as a fan, probably because before I was into Fish, I loved going to music festivals, right? And so the idea that my new favorite band in the world also has this incredible culture of throwing these festivals all by themselves and they're the only people playing was just mind-blowing to me, not only as a Fish fan, but just a music festival fan in general.
And I'm excited to hear more about that aspect of it. But before we get to Fish specifically, let's hear about your background as a fan and as a person with the Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
Seamus, when was your first Fish show and what do you remember from it? What did you think?
My first Fish show was July 18th, 2016 at the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium in San Francisco.
So I was at
Quicks,
that show.
yeah.
I was at all three of those shows. Was this the first night? Was this night one of the
Uh,
three?
I believe this was night two, but we're gonna have to fact check that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I remember them not so much by the date, but by the highlights of each one. I remember night one had an amazing sneak and sally through the alley.
This was night one. Yep.
Okay, great. What did you think?
My mind was completely blown. And I don't even mean that in a mellow way. They opened with Martian Monster. So let me just backtrack really quick. The summer before this is summer 2016. Summer before was summer 2015. That's the summer of me going into my senior year of high school, and that was the Fare Thee Well Grateful Dead shows. I went to both those shows in Santa Clara, and that was my first intro into anything jam related whatsoever. I'd never listened to the Grateful Dead, I'd never listened to Fish. So those 2015 shows with Trey playing guitar, it just blew the roof off of everything that I thought music could be and should be. So that changed me forever. And so then I blindly bought tickets to this Fish show in 2016. This is the summer going into my freshman year of college. So I went by myself. I took the train up there from the South Bay to San Francisco. I was 18 years old. I was by myself, had no idea what to expect. Had listened to maybe a little bit of Fish, but really didn't know what I was getting myself into. And they start The Martian Monster with the page, "You are about to blast off," or
Yeah,
whatever those first words are.
yeah, you
You
have
are
been selected for a
you have
journey.
been
Yeah.
selected exactly. And the funk groove starts, and I'm just looking around in absolute disbelief. What have I gotten myself into? The whole show was a miracle, an absolute miracle for me. I feel so blessed to have gotten that experience. And after the show, I took the train back home, fell asleep on the train,
Oh
missed my
no.
missed my stop. So instead of getting off in Mountain View, I went all the way down to San Jose. Woke up at 2 in the morning in San Jose by myself. I had no phone, no wallet. Actually, that's an important thing to put here. I had asked my neighbor at the Fish show to look at his phone for the train schedule so that I wouldn't miss it. Anyways, wake up in San Jose at 2 in the morning. I start walking around, and eventually I flag down a taxi and I say, "Hey, if you take me to this address, I'll give you $50 cash when I get home." And I was saved.
But how lucky you are that you got to see your first show at the Bill Graham. What a great venue that is.
Absolutely, I couldn't say it better myself. Very wonderful, very also very beautiful in the sense that the friend's dad, who is the one who told me to go to the 2015 Grateful Dead shows, his first Grateful Dead show was 1980 at the Civic Center. So it just lots of parallels going on. And I love how now every show that I've been to since Bill Graham, how much of a unique venue it really is. It's not the wraparound hockey rink. It's not the outdoor pavilion. It's kind of this like very intimate enclosed space.
Unless you get right behind one of those pillars, you're super close to the band and you have a great view no matter where you are.
Totally.
Did you end up going to any of the other two nights?
I did not. I did not.
Well, then, what was your most recent show and what did you think of it as of today's recording?
As of today's recording, my most recent show was, I would say, night four of Mondegreen, but we all know that it's day four of Mondegreen. So that was my most recent show. And it lives in a beautiful place in my mind. For those listening, it was supposed to be a nighttime show, but there was weather inbound, so they turned it into a one long set daytime show. It was I'd call it like a landing. It was a landing from the weekend. It was just, I hung out in the way back under the trees and relaxed with my friends and enjoyed the show, and we all went our merry way after. It wasn't not particularly notable in the sense of it was a heater of a show, but it was a great time and of a unique experience for me, where it was my only daytime fish show.
That's fun. I have the same experience as you in a sense where after night three, the show that we're going to talk about today, when I was walking out of the venue with my friends, and we had known already that they were going to switch the set time the next day, right? Coming into this show, the third night, we knew that day four was going to be day four, not night four. And I remember walking out thinking and saying aloud that if the festival was over after night three, I would have felt like we got our money's worth. So everything that happened on the daytime set on day four was gravy.
Totally. Just a nice little extra.
So aside from Mondegreen, and if Big Cypress didn't happen, what is your favorite fish festival?
My favorite fish festival would be the Great Went. I mean, there are obvious reasons to choose any festival as the answer to that response. Obviously, I
You
mean, the
sound like a
second.
guy who wasn't at Coventry.
Right, exactly. Exactly. But I mean, that second set of, I think it was night two is just as great as fish can really get. And for me, a thing that I particularly love about the Great Went is which some people really dislike, is the late night, as they call it, the European techno secret set. And I really love that. That's just fish at its finest. They play a lot of shows in Europe recently. They're listening to techno music. They get their hands on some old, in Trey's words, like crappy keyboards.
Yeah.
And they kind of just had fun with it. And I really like that. And I'm a fan of electronic music, so I just thought that that was just a really fun thing that they did. And I love listening back to that, honestly.
4 nights at a fish festival. Too much, too little, or just right?
Well, I signed up for 5 nights since I got there on Wednesday. So I think that it's a lot. It would be a lot more manageable if sleep wasn't an issue. But I'll take 4 fish shows at a festival any day of the week, and I'd do it again.
So if you could pick the location, you have a hotline, right, to Fish Inc. for Fish to hold their next festival. Would it be at the Woodlands? Do you want to go up to Limestone? Do you want to go back to Indio? Or you could pick a brand new space. Where would Fish have their next festival if you had the sign off?
I'd pick a brand new space. If I had to choose a place that they've been to before, it would be Limestone, because I think having the festival in a super remote location is ideal to me. But if I were to choose, it would be actually in California, home state bias, and it would be way north, maybe Humboldt County, maybe near Eureka in the Redwoods, where the campgrounds could be tree shaded by giant sequoias, and maybe the concert venue also has redwoods around, and there's a creek or river flowing through the festival grounds. For those of your listeners who haven't been up to the redwoods in Northern California, it's just the definition of a magical place. And also, I think that cooler weather and no humidity would be really nice.
That's the first thing that came to my mind, that you would have to layer up for nighttime shows or for
Absolutely.
overnight. I mean, what does it get down to the 50s, right? Depending on the time of year.
I'm sure. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, surprise lightning round question. Since you're from the Bay Area, that's correct, right?
That is
Originally?
correct.
Okay. So, what is your favorite Bay Area music venue? Pick one indoor and one outdoor so you don't have to, slice your children in half. You get to have it both ways.
This is a great question. Okay, so I will say favorite outdoor venue is the Greek Theater in Berkeley. It's just phenomenal. I mean, enough said. If you've been to the Greek, you know just how great it is. Perfect size, perfect layout, historical. The location is cool, how it's on UC Berkeley's campus. The pillars make it really feel like you are in some old Greek theater. I've been to the LA Greek Theater, and it really isn't quite as Greek. So, and then I'll say, oh man, indoor venue. Maybe I'll give another obvious answer here just because it's true. Well, I'll say the Fillmore, because it's just perfect. I mean, it's intimate. It's something I really like about the Fillmore is that there are speakers throughout the venue. So if you and your friends, there's a bottom floor and it's just flat, and then a top floor where there's some balcony seating. If you're lucky enough to get a seat, there's a bar up there that when you're still looking down at the stage. But then you can actually go further back into a separate large back room with tables and chairs and high top tables where you can't see the stage, and there's another bar in there, and that's where they have all the posters of the historic concerts that have been played at the Fillmore. And when you're in that room way back, not seeing the stage, there's still speakers playing loudly the music. And that is one thing that I just love. Speakers everywhere. And that's one of the things I loved about Mondegreen. There were
Yeah, the sound
speakers
was great no
everywhere.
matter what. Yeah. So I have to ask you a little bit of history. Is the Fillmore that you're talking about, is it the same Fillmore as the Fillmore West, or is it a different building under the business name, the Fillmore? Because there's in New York City, there's Irving Plaza, which I grew up going to concerts and cutting my teeth as a young adolescent, seeing everybody at Irving Plaza. But the Fillmore, the word has become a business name and or like a franchise name, and the Fillmore Inc. bought Irving Plaza. So now it's something like Irving Plaza at the Fillmore, which is a mouthful and to me sounds very dishonest in a way. So is the Fillmore that you're talking about Bill Graham's Fillmore West, or is it a different building under the assumed name?
It is. It's the original Bill Graham's Fillmore West.
That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And I will give the one comment I was going to give about indoor venue as well is I love the Independent. If you or any of the listeners know the Independent, wonderful venue. And that's my little side note to anybody. If you're in San Francisco and a good band's playing at the Independent, do it.
So finally, the question I ask everybody during the lightning round: what is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show?
My answer to this is kind of the funniest, most bizarre, made no sense to me thing that I've seen at a Phish show. And it was at the LA Forum show, which I think was one show in fall of 2021. It was my first and only show that I've been behind the stage. So I was page side behind the stage. There's a speaker facing us. It was very loud, great seats. And next to me and my friends was a dude who was sound asleep for 80% of the show. This isn't a drunken guy passed out. This isn't, some dude who had taken too much drugs or something or fell and hit his head. No, he was just a tired, middle-aged man who was fast asleep. And I'd turn back every 10 minutes to check on him, and he was just snoozing away.
When was this show played?
So let's take a look at the Mondegreen Festival, but a microscope under night 3. Because for anyone listening, whether or not you're at Mondegreen, if you want to scroll back a little bit on your podcast app and listen to an immediate recap, just a whole bunch of hot takes a day or two after the show is over, myself and the guys from Stub Me Down and another guest of the podcast, friend of the podcast, all joined and we all talked it out. But we talked about the festival as a whole. Let's zoom in on night 3. So as you mentioned, Seamus, this show that we're talking about today, the 16th, was night 3 of the 4-night, or as you corrected, 3-night and 1-day Mondegreen Festival. It came at the very end of the summer tour, which was 18 shows, and it ended about 2 weeks before Dick's, which would officially close the summer. And by this point of the festival, day 3, it was my impression that the Phish fan base had kind of made the Dover Raceway our home. Like any huge venue, whether it's indoor, outdoor, or a festival ground, it was confusing and disorienting at first. The second day, you kind of find out the things you missed day 1, but by day 3, you have your bearings. You know where your friends are camped or where to meet up. You know where the entrances and exits are. You may have discovered some extra tricks to when, this exit no one knows about, or that bathroom no one knows about over there. If you're like me and my friends, you kind of already distinguished and picked out your little area that you hang out for the shows. But also by day 3, the toll of being at a Phish festival for 3 days begins to make itself apparent, at least at my age. You kind of are ready to go, even though there's nothing you'd rather do than stay. Seamus, did you stay on site or did you stay off site and go in and out?
Oh, I stayed on site, Brian, and I stayed on site in the glorious GA North that everyone was vying for. I remember in the days leading up to the festival on .net and other forums, people are talking about how can I get into GA North? What time do I need to get there? Blah, 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 blah. And my friends and I made a very deliberate move to get there super early, procure a GA North spot on Wednesday, and proceed to enjoy ourselves for the whole weekend.
What was so special about GA North? Was it just its location to the concert venue that it was close by, a short walk?
I think it was that in conjunction with the fact that it was just a uninterrupted campground, right? And I mean that in the sense of GA South kind of had roads going through, and you'd have to cross a bridge and be near cars at times, and it didn't feel, particularly enclosed as a campground, not very uniform. Versus North, it was just a North campground and nothing else.
Yeah, you mentioned that kind of earlier in our conversation that when you were thinking of different areas to place the next Fish Festival, as you are the most successful concert promoter in the United States, but that you kind of are excited for or that you yearn for that idea of being isolated at a Fish Festival. And I don't have a lot of criticisms of Mondegreen and the way it went. But if I had one, it would be very meta. It would be that it did not feel isolated at all, that you turned off, I don't remember the name, maybe it was Route 13, whatever that main stretch was, that had every single possible store and chain franchise that you could ever hope for or ever wish, whether it was like a Wendy's or if it was the Home Depot. Like it was all there within a half mile. And to me, when we talk about charm in venues, it picked a little bit of that out of the Fish Festival experience. So I understand what you're saying about wanting to be in GA North because you could almost trick yourself into thinking you are in the middle of nowhere.
That's exactly right.
Musically speaking, though, the band, this summer tour, summer 2024, I hope that whenever all is said and done, and I hope that's not for many years, but it will happen, that when people look back on the 3.0 or 4.0 era, what do you call it? Are we in 4.0? I really don't care. I'm just curious.
I think we're in 4.0, but I usually just say 3.0.
Okay, I'm the same way. All right. But when we look back on this era of the band's career, I think summer 2024 will stand out. The whole tour was successful, in my opinion, and this festival put kind of an exclamation point on a tour where there's an argument to be made for the best run of the summer being at Bethel Woods, Deer Creek, Alpine Valley. If you like bluegrass and sit-ins, Grand Rapids. I went to Mohegan Sun, which had its ups and downs. I'm not making a big argument that it's better than any other. But basically, the summer of 2024 was, for lack of a better phrase, an embarrassment of riches. From what I heard, Mondegreen represented the best of the jamming. That's a hill I'll die on. I think Mondegreen was the best of the summer. Did you go to any shows before Mondegreen that summer?
Unfortunately, I did not, but I was very tapped into the streams.
So what was your favorite leading in? What were your expectations leading in? I know expectations are the thief of joy, but a lot of Fish fans, we can't help ourselves.
Yeah, I know we really can't help ourselves. You're totally right. And I do try to not have expectations, and of course I did. I'm trying to think back. So I had high expectations. And I'll tell you what boosted my expectations leading up from other shows was, and again, this is going to have to be fact checked, and you might have to help me out. But they played in Isabella leading up to Mondegreen this summer. They also played the Zappa tune that they also played night two of Mondegreen.
Oh, Peaches and Regalia.
Peaches. So they played Peaches, and then they played the set with Billy Strings. And it kind of just seemed to me like maybe there were some other bust outs that I'm not really remembering, but lots of bust outs bubbling. And, with this whole term Mondegreen, right? The lyrics that you miss here, I kept thinking to myself, like, it's going to be bust out themed of sorts. They're going to do something with regards to playing like new songs or, old songs, blah, blah, blah. And then what really fueled that fire for me was, of course, the Mondegreen sound check. It was
The
just
sound checks are always the best at the festivals.
yeah, I mean, they played My Sharona, and I'm just losing my mind sitting in camp on Wednesday. I'm like, oh my gosh, are they gonna play like an album a la, Halloween style? I had very high expectations.
And like you said earlier, they were met, but maybe not through the media that you were thinking. Maybe it
Ex
wasn't your aisle, but it went down an aisle that was very satisfying.
That's correct. My Mondegreeny bust out theory didn't quite come to fruition, but I was absolutely over my head with joy that weekend.
And you said you were tapped into the jamming and how the band was playing that summer. I was too. I usually don't listen to much Fish before or after the tour. I listen a little bit during the tour, maybe the highlights, but I try not to spoil it for any shows that I have coming up. So, and then I listen to it in retrospect. That's more like how my habit goes,
Absolutely.
as opposed to like a baseball season where I'm watching every game and my heart jumps or breaks, whether they win. I'm a Yankees fan, whether they win two in a row or lose two in a row. With Fish, I'm more, let's wait till it's over and then look back and see what the highlights were. But something that grabbed my attention throughout the summer of 2024, because everyone seemed to be chatting. It didn't seem like there was anyone who said this isn't good or any real complaints, except for the people who needlessly complained about Billy Strings, but they just haven't been paying attention, I guess, to Fish for the past 40 years.
Billy Strings
But
rules.
yeah, yeah, not only does he rule, but having guests and carving your set list to accommodate them is something that Fish has always done. So that's another podcast. But the stuff that really stuck out to me as huge positives in the summer of 2024 was the band's ability to segue in and out of songs throughout a set, like not just Tweezer fests, but other songs like that, where Cross-Eyed and Painless would pop up 4 or 5 times throughout a set, or No Men in No Man's Land would kick off a set, fade away, and then come back later. Like they were very eager to end a song. I used to get tapes that would say, Down with Disease started a set and then it was unfinished. The band seemed to finish every song. And so they would play like self-referential set lists, unlike 2.0, when they would get lost at sea during a 20-minute jam and never return. I love that they felt like they had to close the door on certain jams. Like they didn't forget that they started with No Man in No Man's Land. And also their ability to stick the landing, to end really long jams. It seemed like rather than one band member trying to get everyone back, it just seemed like instantaneous telepathy that they could end it. So to me, 2024, the summer of 2024 was a huge step up from the last couple of years. I don't know if it was maybe their monitor microphones. They gave each other verbal cues like talkback mics, or nailing a coda or shifting into a new jam space. It was just very impressive. What caught your attention musically over the summer?
What caught my attention, honestly, was the cohesiveness of the big jams. I'm trying to remember exactly. There's one really good, maybe two good jams on the Deer Creek run, but I find that length doesn't always equal greatness.
Sure.
But man, they had some big jams summer 2024 that were really coherent, really cohesive, just locked in, listening to each other. Textbook great fish.
So we're at the festival. It's night 3. It's your first time at a Fish festival. You mentioned that you've been to other music festivals. Were they overnight or was it like 4 days in a row with a different headliner?
I had done both. I did Bonnaroo in 2016, and then that was kind of my big music festival in the sense of camping there. I'd done like an electronic music festival in California of camping, and then I'd been to a lot. I'd been to Outside Lands in San Francisco maybe 7 or 8 times, and that's one of those enter every day a la
Right.
Lollapalooza.
And that's Golden Gate Park, right?
That's Golden Gate Park, exactly.
So how are you feeling at Fish? How are you feeling by day 3 when you showed up in time for the music?
I was feeling tired. That I will admit that morning, that was Saturday. That morning I woke up very tired. and I spent my day mostly alone walking around the festival grounds, just trying to do my best to get a sense of the other attractions going on and art installations and whatnot. I went to the Lee Fordham Hall that day and watched the Subtle Sounds competition, where the fans buzz in when they hear a little bit of a song and try to guess the song. That was really fun. I spent ungodly amounts on a coffee inside the venue. I can't remember how much. I think an iced coffee was like $17 or just something absolutely ridiculous. But it was a slow warm up for me. By the time I got into the festival grounds for showtime, maybe I got in there around 6 o'clock or so. I was ready to go, and energy was high. Yeah. So it was a slow morning for me though.
As tends to happen at festivals or 3-day runs or 4-night runs, whatever it may be. So, of all the shows that you've seen, and you reached out to me, as I mentioned, to kind of put a hold on Mondegreen, sort of, right? I don't want anyone listening to get the wrong impression. But of all the shows you've seen and all the experiences you've had, why did you pick night 3 of Mondegreen as opposed to any other show or jam you could have chosen for this podcast?
It's interesting. This is, I guess the definition of attendance bias, right? There are intricacies as to why a particular show jumps out to you. And for me, it was in the moment. I just knew this was one of the best shows I'd ever been to. And that's, to put it simply musically, it was because I thought it was very clean fish. I sometimes find that, the band can be reaching for some musical accomplishments or places to go to that they don't quite get to, and they stretch themselves thin. But I felt like they were all playing really well together, really listening to each other, lots of musicianship. Number two, phenomenal song choices that I really loved. And more than that, just song placement, which I really appreciated. And then, of course, number three, this is the whole experience of the festival. I'm here at the Woodlands at a fish festival. It's Saturday night. The night before was the amazing Secret Set, which somebody needs to come on your show to talk about at length. So, just you talk about set and setting. The set and setting was perfect. And finally, another piece of absolute magic to the whole thing for me was being surrounded by some very close friends, some of which I had not seen since I graduated college years ago. So that was a really special experience.
Set one.
Well, let's get into some of that clean music. Set 1 opens with a Mike's groove. You can't get better. My first thoughts as I pressed play to re-listen to it was, this is killer. Like, it's always a good sign when Mike's opens a set, or especially when it opens a show. I have friends who would say they're wasting it, right? That it's not going to be a big jam because it's opening a show, but there's not much more that can get the crowd as revved up as Mike's song does. It does jam a little bit. It's not quite the exploratory Mike song that would drive people crazy in 1996 or 1997 or 2015, but right away at like 3 minutes and 30 seconds, the jam is already starting with some experimental playing with two members of the band hooking up and then falling apart. I thought in the moment, you want to talk about how you felt at the time, the Mike song already made the show feel a little more energetic and creative compared to the previous night 2, which I thought was a little slow, a little less energy.
Couldn't agree more, Brian. And I thought that on top of what you've said, the fact that I don't know where you were in the venue, but I was maybe right in line with the soundboard page side. There was a big beach ball war that happened right as Mike started. So, that just sent the energy sky high. I thought, just like you said, Mike's song is, just a power opener, and it gets the energy high for the crowd and for the band. and it was patient, slow, steady, good mics.
Yeah, it was a good mics, and it slid right into I Am Hydrogen. I remember just feeling so happy that they were playing it because it's not a given. It hasn't been a given for many, many years, but they played it and they played it well. And even on top of that, you mentioned that Mike song was a little bit slower, and patient. I Am Hydrogen was not that slow. It was at a pretty good clip. It was a throwback to when they used to play it flawlessly. And they don't always do that anymore. And on top of that, Trey's tone is perfect. I wrote he's got his Allman Brothers thing going on. And I Am Hydrogen doesn't have a lot of room for exploration or improvisation. And this one doesn't, but it sounds a little different to me.
Totally. And it's funny. When they do the mics, the true mics groove, I like it better than if they were to play something besides Hydrogen. Sometimes they'll do something besides Hydrogen or kind of go elsewhere. And, Hydrogen is just such a good compliment to Mike's and Pog. So God bless.
You should listen to a lot of 94 and 96. If you want to get some Mike's simple Hydrogen, that'll blow your mind. There's some good stuff. Yeah, so that's my recommendation to you. But of course, they all end the same way because it closes with Week of Pog Groove, where again, they're doing this chasing each other as early as 2 minutes. And other than that, I just like how much space there is in this playing. And on top of that, that comes from how powerful Mike chooses to be or chooses to kind of hang back. I thought that Mike was very dominant already by the end of these 3 songs.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole theme for the show for me was it was a lot of Mike driving the grooves. A lot of Mike driving the grooves. I have noted in this Pog, how do you define plinko jamming? Can I ask you that, Brian?
It's kind of like, I think the Supreme Court, I forget who it was, said that they know pornography when they see it. It's like I can't define it, but I know it when I hear it. With
exactly.
Plinko. What comes to my mind is there's a lot of Plinko jamming at Super Bowl. If we're talking festivals, especially, it's when the band kind of backs out and Trey plays a lot of short staccato notes with very loose rhythm from Fishman and Mike. There was a lot of it I could think of. There's a really good version of Catapult, actually, of all songs, in August 14th, 2009 in Hartford, when the band just breaks down completely and Trey comes up with this funny little like blip, 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 groove on his, it's like a delay pedal sound, like that goes over and over again. And to me, that's kind of Plinko jamming combined with, say, the Golden Age from Super Bowl.
Yep. Yeah, I have a 315 Trey Plinko jamming so wonderful note.
Yeah, I wrote the same thing, 3 minutes. But that all for me, it was Mike. I wrote how selective he's being about how and where he contributes. And
Yes,
Trey is bringing more sustain. But even though this is kind of a compact Mike's groove.
absolutely. Yeah. And then, I noted that around 5:20, they just have a really nice descent right back into the bass groove. And again, just like the mics, it didn't explode, but it kept the energy there. It had everyone's attention, and it was so enjoyable.
Yeah, it got everyone going. It got us off on the right foot before Theme from the Bottom, which I absolutely loved. Maybe my favorite song of the first set, because we all know this song backwards and forwards. It's excellent placement, first of all, but you could hear them in these little spaces, like around 2 minutes, where the band finds opportunities to add little flourishes. I think I mentioned grace notes earlier. Like they take a song that you're so familiar with down to the note and they change it or add something just a little bit. And once Trey does it, it's almost like giving permission for everyone else. So at like 5 minutes and 20 seconds, Trey does a little lick, and then Mike joins in the second time. Paige joins in on piano, and it's like a different song within the song we all know.
I wrote a similar thing. I said, lots of fun licks from Trey in the first verse.
Yeah.
That's those moments are just the best. Like you said, when we know it front to back, but they give it a little extra flavor.
Time in the forest to dig under rocks. You're floating in the ocean, asleep in a box. Or sit just below all the churning and frog. To swim to the light source or fly like a ball. So toss away stuff you don't need in the end, but keep what's important and know who's your friend. So I ask you why I'm swimming by. Don't you see anything that you like to try? I'm swimming by.
Yeah, and then they go on a nice jam. They go on a nice type 2. To me, it's almost interchangeable with Free. There is that sound like this kind of wall of sound sort of jam. And at about 9.5 minutes or 10 minutes, this is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier on this tour, that the band just nails this change with gusto. They're jamming in this kind of abstract, weird, noisy way. And then as if they counted down from 10, which as far as I know, they didn't, but they may have. But as if they counted down from 10 and they just nail the change, and all of a sudden we're back into Theme from the Bottom to end it.
Couldn't agree more. And I thought that, just a brief harken back to the mics, the same thing happened there. Those syncopated notes that indicate the end of mics. They just hit them hard together as one, so locked in. Same thing with that theme from the bottom. Beautiful.
Perfect. Yeah. And then they go on to Blaze On, which is a big party song to keep the crowd dancing and engaged. After Theme from the Bottom was a little bit more experimental, this picks up that same vibe from the opening Mike's Groove. To me, this Blaze On was great. It was fun, but nothing out of the ordinary. To me, the set list is still batting 1,000. But, if you had to go to the bathroom, Blaze On might be a good time to do it.
Hilarious that you say that. The only note I have for the Blaze On is I peed the whole time.
We seem to have had either similar mindsets or similar experiences, but Blaze On is a good break for everyone. We all need them. But they pick it back up with Gotta Jaboo, which is a nice call because as expected as Blaze On may have been with its playing, Gotta Jaboo is a nice way to kind of mellow out. Everyone is feeling it by now. Whatever you took when they came on should be kicking in right around here at Gotta Jaboo.
What I say for this Jaboo and every Jaboo is what's better than a Trey pedal loop?
Yes, I wrote that too in 6 minutes and 30 seconds. I wrote not exactly
Right.
the jam siren, right? It's not 1999, but it's close. Some sort of loop or delay that leads to the abstract jamming, which I love. Then Mike takes the lead with a bass bomb about 3 minutes later, and otherwise it's very airy and ambient.
Yes, I have a 925-ish bass bomb. Was there another one or was
No,
it
we're
around then
probably
as
we're
well?
probably just
Okay.
listening to two versions of the same recording.
Yeah. 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 What a great, yeah. And I noted it at 7 minutes, it kind of goes into a little bit of a dark groove, kind of a deeper flavor that was really nice and which lends itself to, that kind of relaxing feeling that you were alluding to with this jam.
And they kind of all like air out. They kind of soften it a bit, and Mike comes in. It sounds to me, to my ears, a little out of key, but he's playing the do 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 do, like he plays the Gotta Jaboo
Yes.
bass line. And it's to me, it sounds like either he's lost or he's just trying to signal everyone, all right, time to wrap up, which they all do at 12 minutes. They all just lock in and they end the song.
Really cool Jaboo. A nice little touch of exploratory, right?
But just a touch.
Just a touch, exactly.
They follow it up with 46 days. And by this point, those of you listening at home, if you haven't heard this set or you weren't there, you could just imagine the amount of energy, the amount of rock for a Mike's Groove into kind of an airy and experimental theme from the bottom, but then Blaze On, Gotta Jaboo, and 46 Days, they're really pushing it ahead. There's a lot of rock. I'm thinking of mostly Fishman right now, who's playing in 46 Days could be something from a classic rock radio station.
I'm trying to remember exactly what the tone was, but around 2:15, Trey breaks into that really cool tone, and Mike a couple minutes later just gives it that really gritty, good kind of chaotic psychedelia sound.
Yeah, I wrote very similar notes that Trey's leading a very heavily synthesized guitar tone and Mike is keeping everything structured. He's kind of I'm thinking I'm a middle school teacher, right? So I'm thinking about 7th or 8th grade biology where you learn about cellular walls. If you didn't have a cellular wall, your whole cell would just be a bunch of goop with things floating around. To me, Mike was the cell wall. in this.
Totally.
He's kind of boxing everyone in a positive way, so things that just don't slip over the side.
I love
And
that description.
yeah, and it's when you're a middle school teacher, you kind of revert all of your knowledge back to 7th and 8th grade, and nothing happened after that. But this it becomes a very atypical 46 days, but then at 6 minutes, it's very edgy, and they're kind of picking at one another as opposed to a strong rock song. But then when they get to the coda, of course, they end it with a big explosion before playing the single for this summer's new album, Evolve.
That's exactly right. I love the disjointedness that then culminates together towards the end of that jam.
What do you think of Evolve as a song?
I like it. I have to admit, it came on and I leaned over to my buddy and I said, "What song is this?"
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at with things. I don't dislike it, but I don't think I'm crazy about it.
Do you have to pee again? Is that what
Did
your
not-
note is?
Did not pee again. Did not pee again. Because as soon as he said this is Evolve, I was like, okay, I need to actually listen to this song in full.
This is a song that I like, and I'm liking it the more I hear it. Like it happens with a lot of new Fish songs, new to me at least. It sticks around in my head almost despite myself. I'll walk out singing the chorus or get out of my car singing the chorus after listening to this set, even though I can't remember any of the other words in the song.
Right.
And then they get the crowd way back into it with Meat Stick. It's a great crowd response. It's a good time party song. And my only note is it's hard not to like this one. Everyone was in on it.
It is the freaking Meat Stick. As soon as that wave of sound from Paige comes over the crowd, it's party time. Everyone's looking around. Everyone's high-fiving. The vibes are as sky high as they can get. And I noted that around 3 minutes, Fish brings in a cowbell, which is really, really nice. It was a short but sweet Meat Stick, but God, do I love Meat Stick.
A lot of people do. It just seems to be in the air. A lot of people like it. And then we're already at the end of the set with David Bowie. And there was a nice segue into the hi-hat intro from the end of Meat Stick with what I described as an unclear jam at about 6.5 minutes. There's like a little melody that catches on, and everyone joins in one by one, and then it just dissipates. To me, this David Bowie was good, but I was probably on my way to the bathroom and back so that I wouldn't have to stand in line during the set break. Where were you on this, Bowie?
Fair. No, I think I thought the composed section was very good and focused. I thought that, the jam was just a slow build to the ending, whatever you'd call that, power outro or whatever.
The coda.
The coda. Just good. Bowie's one of my favorite tunes. So yeah, but I didn't think it was anything particularly remarkable, but I loved it and I love Bowie.
Yeah, and more than anything, it's just a nice cherry on top to a nice compact and fun set.
Totally. They play Meat Stick and I'm already thinking, oh, God bless. And then, they play Bowie and I'm like, you really don't have to, guys. You don't need to treat me so well.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor if you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode.
Set 2.
Set 2 starts with a really interesting opening. At the time, I was trying to figure out what was going on. So Fishman starts playing a kind of drum beat that is like half 2001. but it's not the full on, everyone knows this is 2001 drum beat. So I feel like they either discussed it backstage before they came on, let's open with 2001, but maybe how are we going to start it? Because usually it's segued into, or they bust into it after a big ending of a previous song. So there's like a Fishman fake out for the first few seconds, to the point where I thought in my wildest dreams that they were going to play Once in a Lifetime by the Talking Heads. But
God,
no.
that would have been amazing.
Yeah, that would have been amazing. But 2001 was still good.
Yeah, I can see how you would think that, given the Fish dropout.
Because it was like heavy on the hi-hat and it was boom, boom, tss, and then he just stopped a
Totally.
few times.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I in my first note here is, are you kidding? Question mark. Talk about set 2 starting energy. It's just so amazing. We don't deserve this 2001 set 2 opener. Way to just, it's just like Mike's, right? Starting the set 1. It's just a crowd pleaser dance party that is certainly, it's just carrying the energy of set 1, really. It's just Fish telling the crowd, "Hey, yeah, we're going to keep this party going."
Yeah, it's keeping the energy and upping it also. My thought was I could throw a dart at this 2001 and whatever timestamp it landed on could be described as really groovy. Like it was a lot of fun to zone out during this 2001.
Absolutely. I have a note of around 220. Page plays I think it's like an ascending arpeggio, and Fish complements it with a quarter note triplet drum fill, and I'm just thinking to myself, they are so locked in. Lots more spacey notes and chords from Page follow. I felt, kind of, the big 2024 note that you have of transitions at 640, they drop right back into the main groove, and just good expansion and contraction.
Just like Space, just like 2001.
Exactly.
And then they play Oblivion with Evolve, which is the other big regular that's going to be probably taken from the Evolve album. It seems like since maybe Big Boat on, there's maybe 3 or 4 songs from each album that stick around. And to me, so far, it's Evolve, Oblivion, and there'll probably be 2 or 3 more from Evolve, the album. I'll just say it. To me, it's very obvious that songs with lyrics by Tom Marshall, and in this case, Scott Herman, are better than the songs that have lyrics by Trey. I don't know if that's a controversial opinion, but I like them better. If not musically, certainly lyrically.
Totally.
And then what a shock, during Oblivion, around 4.5 minutes, Mike again is dominating. It's really interestingly that they settle back into kind of a mellow jam where Mike is so straightforward. And there's a little progression at 8 minutes that quickly pivots to rhythm guitar, and then they just kind of noodle out at the end. So Oblivion, I think, is still finding its way, but there's going to be a breakout one of these times coming up, whether it's in the calendar year of 2024 or 2025, where Oblivion is going to just explode somewhere.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. This one, Oblivion didn't really grab me, and this was my first time hearing it, but, I'm looking forward to where that song goes in the future.
And as I began my re-listen for this conversation, the re-listen of this set, when I saw that Down with Disease was next, I was so excited and even a little bit worried. I was so excited because I remember this being probably the musical highlight of the weekend, if not the secret set or the not so secret set. But Down with Disease, I remember just having everything in the world is perfect, and this is why we travel, this is why we spend, this is why we meet up with people. Like, there's a jam right in the middle of Down with Disease that was, this is it, capital I, capital T. And I was a little worried that maybe it wouldn't live up to my memory and the emotion. You know, those things are kind of transient sometimes, but I gotta say, this Down with Disease holds up.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, this is one of those jams that I will show my friends who are fish curious. This is the it. This is it.
And I'll have you know that in my notes while listening to this, I did use the phrase quasi plinko at 6 minutes and 20 seconds. So if you want to know what Plinko means to me, you could go to that timestamp at a little bit after 6 minutes, and it's just great rock music. They start a cool riff again. This show is very riff based. Trey comes up with a lot of cool little melodies that he repeats over and over again that really leads to some powerful jams.
That's exactly it. And that in my opinion can be the difference between a good jam and a great jam. There's lots of good jams that are just heavily groove based and everyone's locked in, and there's lots of Trey soloing and maybe some features from other members, and it goes somewhere and it's wonderful and it culminates in a peak and voila. But there are those great jams that also have the more 1993 style, one of the bandmates plays a riff and then everyone hops in and locks in on the exact same rhythm, exact same notes, and then it explodes from there. And that's exactly what happened on this Disease and a lot of the other jams.
It happens a lot in this Disease, at least. There's a lot of timestamps. I won't go through them all, but there's shifts at 8:30 to a lower key. It leaves a bigger role for Trey because there's a lot of space, noticeably because Mike doesn't play as assertively. now Trey is kind of able to step up, but then it quiets a little. And I wrote that Mike drives the car again, even when Trey is rock star soloing. There's switched back and forth between like a major key and a minor key around 12 minutes. It has echoes of Weekapaw Groove.
Yes, exactly. And all those transitions are so smooth and so natural. It's almost as if they know where each other is taking it, and combine that with the call and responses, and it's just a magnificent jam. I also want to note on the around 8 minutes, Trey loops some very kooky sound that I particularly love. So listeners, go check that out.
Yeah, I agree. And when you describe them as if they know what each one is going to do and they kind of build on each other, you could have used that description to describe this cool band Fish in 1993 and 1994. You wouldn't believe it. It's like they could read each other's minds when they're improvising and jamming. That's the greatest thing about all this.
100%. Yeah, really magical. Yeah, the 12-minute transition that you note is particularly nice. And then I have another transition noted around 14:45.
Yep.
Just tight, natural transitions. And again, I'll just say, sometimes Fish jams can jump and jump from themes and major to minor. And let's face it, it can be clunky. This was seamless.
Seamless. Yeah. At that same point, I described it as headbanging stuff. This is the peak, all in capital letters. The audience recording that I was using and that I was listening to was almost so good that it sounded like a soundboard, and you could hear that the crowd is going nuts with it. This to me was the highlight of the weekend. Now that we're talking about it, I'm getting more excited again.
And I think with the headbang, you're talking about when Fish takes it into the halftime rhythm and they start building up to the ultimate culminating Trey riff.
And when it closes, when it ends Down with Disease, talk about setlist placement. You know, you said this as one of the reasons you chose this show. Down with Disease into Tweezer after opening with a Mike's Groove and then having a David Bowie at the end of set one. Like, this is really one of the best set lists that you could hope for. Tweezer, you know, the crowd's been waiting for this one. It's very obvious. I could be wrong on this one, but memory serves that they didn't play Tweezer at the Bethel Woods run, or even if they did, people were all saying, you know, can't wait for the Mondegreen Tweezer.
Right. No,
to the
absolutely.
point where people started wooing, and I was certainly standing straight up with my arms crossed in front of my chest. I was like, don't ruin it.
I know.
I'm not a big wooer. How do you feel about woos?
So here's the thing. I would prefer that nobody woos. You know, when you listen back to, I'm trying to think of like a legendary start-stop jam, like what is December, what's that, December 6th, 96, Tweezabella, is that the 6th or the 7th?
I think it's the 7th, yeah.
Yeah, the Tweezabella, that has a incredible start-stop jam. Where everybody drops out. Maybe not. Okay, you know what is a legendary start-stop jam is the Island Tour Roses.
Sure.
Right? Okay, that's a wonderful start-stop jam. And, you know, nobody woos at that show, right? And so when the band can leave full beats of silence, that is just absolute magic to me. And I wish nobody would woo. But when everybody else starts wooing, I start wooing as well.
You've become the very thing that you swore to destroy.
I know.
Well, this Tweezer, I use the phrase Plinko. I described it this time, though. Last time it was quasi Plinko. Now it's Plinko synth jam at 9 minutes. And I'm thinking of you because you said how you like electronic music, that Page's use of synthesizers this summer of 2024 has been outstanding and very tasteful, and it comes in around the 9-minute mark with also Fishman, whatever he's doing with his hi-hat, with constantly lifting it while playing an upbeat kind of calypso rhythm on the snare drum.
Yes.
God. This is multifaceted, this Tweezer. Very enjoyable.
Yes, I noted that as like sort of a reggae interplay with Fish. Right. It's so good. Great. And then there's I noted around 9:30, there's that very kooky Trey effect, which I absolutely love.
And they close it up, this Tweezer. It pays off. All this weird, like you said, this kooky guitar effect and Fishman playing, you know, hi-hat, upbeat calypso music. We could go on words, but it all comes together in this really strong power rock riff at about 17 minutes, and they're on fire. And it feels like the highlight of the festival, even though I said literally a minute ago that Down with Disease was the highlight of the festival. But right. Mike throws in his bass bombs, and they're able still to bring it back to Tweezer to wrap it up. Perfect package.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it, you know, I've been to a fair share of shows and, we're already at like three mic bombs this show, which just felt so rare. I'm like, oh my gosh.
They kind of take a left turn into more, I want to say more recent, but at this point it's 20 years old. But Sense and Subtle Sounds, Trey kind of chugs the end of Tweezer and slides into Sense and Subtle Sounds. To me, this one was a bit more meandering than the previous big jams. This was a chill out, a return to earth. This was the go to the bathroom slash set one's blaze on that you could kind of chill out here during Sense and Subtle Sounds, although I know it's a lot of people's favorite songs.
Totally, yeah. I love this song. It will always take me back to the Charleston 2019 sense where they had the Mission Impossible tease or jam or whatever you want to call that. Just good, relaxing jam that got groovy, a little bit hypnotic at the end, which I liked. And then, of course, into Boogie On.
Yeah, you want to talk about groovy. I remember looking around. This is a memory that will stick with me from Mondegreen and just seeing everyone completely beatific and thrilled. Everyone was just like, yeah, obviously, boogie on. And everyone was just dancing as embarrassing as they could be in the most positive way they could be. It seemed like it was the most obvious thing in front of your face, but everyone was still thrilled to hear it.
Totally. And it's funny. So I was with, a group of a lot of college friends, and relatively close to us was another one of my friends from college, but who was there with, another group of people. So he was separate from us. I've been wanting him to come to us the whole show and hang out with us instead. And so at Boogie On, I walked over, I grabbed him. I said, "Yep, this is the time. You're dancing with us now."
Yeah, be the change you want to see in the world.
Right.
And then they closed the second set with Carini. Like, what a hell of a call. It's not going to be a Carini that you tell your grandchildren about, but it's still like rock jamming, extensive sustain by Trey. It's the way to end a classic show. And when I said that day four, the daytime set was kind of all gravy, I felt that way already. So by the time
Totally.
they came on for the encore and it started with Backwards Down the Number Line, it's like, all right, it doesn't poke it much. It's just happy, feel good vibes, typical Backwards Down the Number Line.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They didn't need to play Carini, right? They didn't even need to
Right.
play Boogie On. They could have just ended with a Golgi after Sense and called it a day. But yeah, so wonderful. Encore backwards down the number line. I'm a huge fan. I don't know about you, Brian, but I love that song. Just being surrounded by friends at a concert, and it's just fun, sing along, feel good, kind of it's got a soft spot in my heart.
I think I have PTSD from 2009 and 2010 when the opening chords of Backwards Down the Number Line usually meant that whatever jam they were cooking and about to go into was no longer going to happen. I don't dislike the song itself, but those opening chords, I call them, let me see what I call them, the opening rhythm chords of death. It doesn't mean
Fair,
that anymore, but it used to, and it stuck
fair.
with me. Just like some people have old racist grandparents who don't think that there's anything wrong with using some words and phrases. That's going to be me with Backwards Down the Number Line in 10 years.
Yep, I get that. And the thing, but the beautiful part about this placement is, opening tune in the encore. I don't know about you, but I had a lot of faith in the band to not end us on that after such a heater of a show.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And they did close it as a heater because after Backwards Down the Number Line is You Enjoy Myself, the Song of Songs, and Tweezer Reprise, which is, standard best closer ever performance.
So good. And it wasn't a hard call to make, but I'll just let the fans know that I did lean over to my buddy as number line ended, and I said, "Yem."
That, you know what? That's a harder call than you might think. Because I think if you said Tweezer Reprise, it would be like, yeah, old man yells at cloud, way to go.
Right.
Like, good job, buddy. But You
Right.
Enjoy Myself as an encore after a song has already been played as the curfew is kind of sneaking up. It's a nice surprise, just the same.
Yeah, it is great. And it's, as you said, it's a song of songs. Here we go. Buckle up. It's also nice just in an encore when you know you have more time with the band. You just know that you've got 15 minutes plus with the band left, and it's just, the music is not going to stop, and let's have some more fun. And it also happens to be one of the greatest songs.
What was the vibe like at the campsite after the show?
Well, I stayed for the Sylvan Esso DJ set at the Heliograph, so that was a very fun transition after a wonderful, wonderful show, being able to, continue the party there with lots of fans and lots of my friends. And I was so pleasantly surprised by the music. As I've said, I love electronic music, and he was playing just the whole slew of electronic genres: house, techno, garage, some bassy stuff. It was just like very creative, very, I'm not going to say fishy, but you can tell the guy's just a fan of a lot of different types of music, and he was touching on lots of different genres and keeping things really interesting instead of, your classic four on the floor house set for 2 hours. I think he really kept the fans in a cool, excited, stoked place. And then after that, I took a shower and honestly went to bed.
Yeah, you got to get up early. There's going to be another Fish show in 12 hours.
Right. Yeah, we got people to see, places to go, people.
Well, Seamus, thank you so much for not only doing such a great job on narrowing down which show of the festival you wanted to talk about today, but coming correct, coming prepared, excited to talk about this. It really made my job as the host super easy. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on Attendance Bias.
Brian, this is such a treat. I have been listening to your podcast for a long time, so please keep up the good work. I will keep listening, and I'm just happy to contribute to this wonderful world that you've created. So thank you.
So even though the Mondegreen Festival wasn't that long ago, there were a few things that I got wrong and a few things we had to double check. So let's make sure we get it all right.
Attendance bias fact check.
First, we may as well start from the top. When I introduced today's show with Seamus, I referred to it as August 16th, 2024, but it was actually played on August 17th, 2024. Seamus's first show was on July 18th, 2016 at the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium, and he was right. It was the first night of a 3-night run at the intimate venue. My question to Seamus about whether or not the current day Fillmore is the same concert venue as the Fillmore West, the answer is kind of complex. The venue was built in 1912 and it was originally called the Majestic Theater. In 1954, it was renovated and called the Fillmore. Bill Graham took over as a promoter in 1966 after the original promoter was found mysteriously murdered. The case has not yet been solved. Soon after, the area around the Fillmore became decrepit and declined in popularity, so Graham shut down the venue, he left, and he took over the Carousel Ballroom, which he rechristened as the Fillmore West in 1968. That venue was closed and reopened a number of times throughout the decades, even being renamed the Elite Club in the 80s. It was reopened as the Fillmore in 1994 and has operated under that name ever since. Speaking of which, my gripe about the, quote, Fillmore brand taking over Irving Plaza in New York City was rescinded in 2010. Since then, it has been known simply as Irving Plaza. If you want to hear the attendance bias recap of the Mondegreen Festival as a whole, that episode was posted back on August 28th, 2024, with Skinny and JW from the Stub Me Down podcast, as well as friend of the podcast, Scott King. The Isabella that was played leading up to Mondegreen was at Deer Creek on August 3rd, 2024. It closed the first set after a wonderful version of Reba. And speaking of great versions of Isabella, the Tweezer into Isabella Segway was played on December 6, 1997 at the Palace at Auburn Hills near Detroit. There is an attendance bias episode about just that transition with friend of the pod, Bill Statler. Toward the end of today's conversation, my memory did not serve me correctly. The band did play Tweezer at Beth Elwood's before Mondegreen on night 1 of that 3-night run, August 9th, 2024. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Seamus Gallivan for joining me today, Fish.net for their help with the fact check, the Mockingbird Foundation for everything they do to support music education for children, and Fish.in for the outstanding recording used in today's episode. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, you could support the show by leaving a rating and a review of it on your favorite podcast app, and you could visit www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate anything you can. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.